So into testing.
Yes.
Uh, last week we ended up talking about, oh yeah, like this testing technique, right? And I remember talking about, oh, but this is they still have to purify the RNA beforehand. And I heard there were shortages of purification columns and those types of reagents. So I found this paper to sort of see what was the frontier in that space. A fast and accessible method for the isolation of RNA, DNA, and protein to facilitate the detection of SARS-CoV-2. Basically, they have a buffer that they made.
Yeah. Apparently, they've got a different mix of chemicals that are readily available, and
Uh-huh.
so that are not there is not a global shortage of them, which is good.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. And so you
and
can mix them up, do your lysis step in them, and then precipitate out the RNA from that mix.
yeah, and I think it's quite interesting because this group was also developing CRISPR test, and they developed this just to help them with that. So I think it's kind of interesting that they're already thinking of that sort of thing, and it's a nice kind of companion if you've read like last week's paper and are wondering, okay, how can I want to apply this in real time?
Yep.
I've bought my phone, I've bought a thing, I want to do my own home CRISPR test. How can I
Yep.
how can I start testing COVID? I mean, this is a great companion paper to that.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Bridging the gap. Here's a complementary method that can be employed there.
Yeah. Um. So
Okay. Optimal COVID-19 quarantine and testing strategies. Um, yeah, so another one that I ferreted out. And I guess this is what puts me in the mood, right, for thinking about like these public health things. Again, this is just a model
mhm.
that they deploy on some data, right? I believe it's a data set that they're fitting into this model and just trying to see like for if you're tested before you enter the country, before the entry moment or exiting quarantine, before you enter quarantine or after you exit quarantine, where can you employ a test to shorten that quarantine period, right? Because 14 days is this like standard
Yeah.
quarantine period. That's the conservative estimate of the full course of infection. But people want to maybe use testing to try to
Yeah.
just and people have, right? Like that's why they could do this study because there have been policies that say, oh, test to get out of quarantine or test before to yeah, to lower the amount of time you have to stay in.
I think that's a kind of an interesting idea because I mean, so if I say, so if I'm going to like say New Zealand or I guess Canada, you're gonna make me quarantine for 14 days, or in the UK, I guess if I'm exposed to someone who has SARS-CoV-2, they're gonna make me quarantine for 14 days, and I guess adding like having a test as I go into quarantine could maybe save time if it goes like, oh, you're negative, but again, there's always
Yep.
this concern that okay, it could be a false negative, and
Yep.
and also, like testing people when they come out of quarantine is actually kind of a no-brainer because in that 14
Yes.
days, like not everyone's going to have the same course of infection. So making sure that you don't have the virus when you're about to walk into society and go hello, you need to make sure that you know you don't have the virus.
Yep. Yeah, and it's one of those things again. It's like these are things that sort of impact like resource management, right? Because like testing is a finite resource at this moment, at least, and so like finding the best strategy that both protects right people but also allows people the most mobility, I think, is what we're trying to get at here. I've experienced two strategies, right? Like I've done the full 14-day quarantine when I've traveled, and then I'm now doing this one where it's like you wait a few days and then you get tested.
Yeah, I think they kind of hedged towards being tested strategy that if you like wait for 7 days and then you've got if you got the infection, that's enough time for it to start showing up, and
Yep.
then you can get that test and confirm
Hmm.
it, and then test as
Hmm.
you exit. Or and if you don't, then you can shorten your test and you'd be like free to go out into the world. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And
so yeah,
I mean, this doesn't even have to apply to traveling between countries, right? Like, if we're being really careful about this control of the pandemic, we could apply it to traveling between counties or like
yeah,
provinces. What do they call regions in the UK, actually?
counties we call them.
Counties.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's an important like thing to think
Yeah,
about.
this type of information applies to all these different levels of organization, right? And like integrating that across like larger and larger spaces is sort of the key to controlling a global event.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All
next
right.